The story did not end when the twins were separated. That was only the moment the world began to listen. What followed was not anger, not punishment. It was reckoning. For the village believed distance would weaken the bond. The elders believed fear could restore balance. But some bonds do not break when pulled apart. They echo. And when they echo long enough, the ancestors answer. This is the part of the story where time slows, where silence speaks, and where a choice must be made that will change not just two lives, but the fate of everyone who stands nearby. Draw closer. Listen carefully, for this is the reckoning of the ancestors and the beginning of what the twins would become. The return of Teniola from the forest did not bring the celebration the parents had prayed for. Instead, as the twins' hands locked in that small mud hut, the very laws of nature began to recoil. Outside, the sun reached its zenith, and then it stopped. It did not sink. It turned a bruised, sickly purple, casting long, distorted shadows across the village. The one soul was no longer a quiet bond. It had become a screaming frequency. The villagers huddled in their homes, listening to a sound that wasn't wind and wasn't rain. It was the sound of the ancestors' discontent. The great baobab at the edge of the village began to change. Its bark, once rough and gray, began to pulse with veins of violet light. The healer declared that the dead of the earth was due. She whispered that the twins were never meant to be human. They were a mistake of the spirits that had to be corrected. Suspense builds as the village elders, driven to near madness by the unnatural darkness, decide that Teniola must be the one to go. Miles away, through a forest that seemed to warp and shift to prevent his passage, walks Evangelist Gabriel. He carries no staff of power, only a worn Bible and a canteen of water. He encounters gatekeepers, spiritual entities masquerading as weary travelers who try to turn him back with lies and threats. His presence is the inciting incident of the spiritual realm. As he draws closer to the village, the purple sky flashes with golden lightning. The battle for the twins' lives begins before he even sees them. Back in the village, the transcending ceremony begins. The twins are not just bound by spirit. The villagers, in their fear, have bound them in physical chains of iron and charms. Friends who played with Teniola and Tamila Day now look at them with eyes of stone. The twins are led toward the baobab. The closer they get, the more their physical bodies seem to fade. They are becoming ghosts before they are even dead. Their mother's scream is the only sound that pierces the rhythmic thumping of the spirit drums. Just as Teniola's foot touches the glowing roots of the baobab, Gabriel breaks through the forest line. The contrast is sharp. The dark, heavy tradition of the village versus the quiet, piercing authority of the missionary. The villagers roar in anger. The healer rises, her feet hovering inches off the ground, her voice a chorus of 1,000 dead souls. Gabriel stands his ground. Gabriel begins to speak of a father who does not demand the souls of children, but who gave his own son to save them. The baobab tree reacts to Gabriel's prayers. It groans like a dying beast. The one soul within the twins begins to thrash. This is a moment of intense agony for Teniola and Tamila Day. They are being pulled between two worlds. Gabriel realizes that the bond is a generational yoke, a legalistic spiritual contract made by ancestors long ago. He begins to pray specifically against the spirit of the twin bond. For the first time, the purple sky cracks. revealing a sliver of true golden sunlight. The healer screams as her charms begin to shatter. The air around the great baobab had turned into a thick, purple sludge. Reality itself seemed to be folding in on Teniola and Tamilade. To the villagers, the twins were disappearing into a haze of static and spirit smoke. To the twins, the world was a cacophony of 1,000 voices screaming for payment. Gabriel stood at the edge of the ritual circle. His feet were planted in the red dust, but his gaze was fixed on the invisible realm. He saw the black, oily tethers, the ancient yoke, wrapped like serpents around the twins' necks, merging into a single knot of darkness that fed into the roots of the tree. The healer's voice rose, no longer human, but a discordant harmony of the ancestors. Stranger, you stand on ground soaked in the blood of the first fathers. You speak to a debt you did not contract. The twins are the property of the earth. One soul was given, and the earth will have its half back. Gabriel opened his Bible. His voice was not loud, but it carried a frequency that made the violet mist tremble. I do not stand on the ground of the first fathers, Gabriel replied. I stand on the rock that was before the foundations of the world. You speak of a debt. I speak of a ransom. You speak of an earth that hungers. I speak of a heaven that has already provided. Gabriel stepped into the circle. The ground beneath his feet hissed. Ancient spirit of the baobab, you who have masqueraded as a guardian while acting as a jailer, I address you now. You claim a bond of one soul, but you are a liar. You did not create these children. You only stole the space between them. He pointed his finger toward the knot of darkness between Teniola and Tamilade. It is written, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. But you have joined what was meant to be two, and you have divided what was meant to be whole. I come against the legalism of this curse. I come against the covenant of the twins. The healer shrieked, her body contorting. They are one. If you cut the bond, they both die. That is the law of the red earth. Gabriel's eyes burned with a holy fire. He reached out, not to the twins, but to the air where the invisible chains pulsed. Then let the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus supersede the law of the red earth. I plead the blood that speaks better things than the blood of the ancestors. He began to pray with an intensity that shook the leaves of every tree in the forest. Every generational finger pointing at these children, be broken. Every mouth of the grave demanding a soul, be silenced. I speak to the cord that binds Teniola to Tamilade. I command you, dissolve in the name of the one who walked through the doors of death and took the keys. A sound like a massive iron chain snapping under the weight of a mountain echoed through the valley. Teniola let out a guttural cry. Tamilade fell to her knees, gasping, the one soul. That black, humming cloud began to glow white-hot. It resisted. It thrashed. It tried to pull Teniola into the tree one last time. Gabriel stepped closer, his hand now hovering over Teniola's head. Go back to the void, you shadow. You have no legal right. Their names are no longer written in the dust of this village. They are written in the Lamb's book of life. I sever the soul tie. I command the spirit of the twin yoke to come out and enter the dry places. Leave them. Be gone. With a final, ear-splitting roar, the baobab tree split from its crown to its roots. A blinding flash of golden light erupted from Gabriel's direction, colliding with the violet darkness. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then the sound of a soft breeze. The black tethers turned into gray ash and blew away. Teniola fell to the left. Temilade fell to the right. The hum was gone. The pull was gone. Teniola opened his eyes. He looked at his hands. For the first time in his life, his hands felt like his hands, not a shared instrument. He looked at Temilade. She was breathing, her chest rising in its own unique rhythm, a rhythm that did not match his. Gabriel stood over them, sweat dripping from his brow, a weary but triumphant smile on his face. He whispered the final seal of the prayer, "It is finished." The roar of the splitting baobab died away, leaving a silence so profound it felt as though the world had been hollowed out. The violet mist did not just fade, it evaporated, leaving behind the scent of ozone and scorched wood. Teniola lay face down in the red dust. For the first time since his birth, the noise in the back of his mind had stopped. For years, his brain had been a crowded room, filled with the echoes of his sister's fears, her hunger, and her dreams. Now there was only a vast, quiet cathedral of his own thoughts. He drew a breath. It was a singular breath. It did not catch in his throat as it often did when Temilade was anxious. It was deep, cool, and entirely his own. Slowly, Teniola pushed himself up. His limbs felt heavy, anchored to the earth by their own weight rather than a spiritual tether. He turned his head toward the right. There sat Temilade. She was clutching her chest, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She was looking at him, truly looking at him. For 18 years, they had looked with each other, their gazes often synchronized like reflections in a pool. Now, she was an other. She was a separate person standing across a distance of 5 feet, a distance that, until this moment, had felt like an impossible abyss. "Teniola?" she whispered. Her voice hit his ears as a sound from the outside. It didn't vibrate in his own chest first. It was a gift he received from the air. I can only hear my own heart," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of terror and ecstasy. "The drumming in my head, it has stopped." Nearby, the healer sat in the dirt, her elaborate cowrie shell crown fallen in the dust. The spirit blindness had left her eyes, leaving them watery and human. She looked at the charred, split trunk of the baobab, the tree she had worshipped as an unbreakable god. She reached out a shaking hand, touching the dead wood. There was no hum, no power, no threat. She looked at Evangelist Gabriel, who stood like a pillar of salt, his Bible still open, his face etched with the exhaustion of a man who had wrestled with principalities. "What have you done, stranger?" she asked, her voice a fragile reed. "You have broken the root. You have killed the law." Gabriel knelt beside her, his shadow falling long and protective over the twins. "The law was a shadow," he said softly. "I have only introduced you to the light. The root was bitter. I have brought you a vine that gives life." The villagers began to creep forward, their faces a mask of confusion. They had seen the power of the ancestors defeated, and they did not know how to walk in a world without fear. One of the village children, emboldened by the new sunlight, tripped over a fallen branch and scraped his palm. Usually, in the old days, if one twin fell, both would cry out. The village held its breath, looking at Teniola and Temilade. Teniola watched the child. He felt a sting of sympathy in his mind, but his own palm did not throb. He looked at his hand. It was smooth, unmarked, and painless. He looked at Temilade. She was smiling through her tears, holding her own hands up to the sun. "I am me," she whispered to the wind, "and he is him." As their hands touched, there was no spark, no jolt of spiritual electricity. There was only the warmth of skin against skin. "What do we do now?" Teniola asked, looking at Gabriel. Gabriel smiled, closing his Bible with a decisive thud. "Now you learn how to walk, not as shadows, but as men and women, and you learn the name of the one who gave you back your breath." The days following the deliverance were filled with a strange, heavy peace. Gabriel began to teach. He did not start by condemning their ancestors. He started by telling them about a father who had been searching for them long before the baobab was planted. "You have lived in fear of the debt," Gabriel told the gathered crowd, his voice resonating through the red dust. "You believed that every blessing required a pound of flesh. You believed that if the rain fell, a child must weep. But look at the sun. Does it ask for payment before it shines? Look at the twins. They breathe today, not because a debt was paid by you, but because the ransom was paid by another." The most suspenseful moment of the chapter comes on the seventh day. The healer, whose name was Yejide, stood before Gabriel. Her eyes were clear, no longer clouded by the violet smoke of the spirits. "For 60 seasons I have listened to the whispers in the wood," she said, her voice shaking. "The whispers told me I was powerful, but when the whirlwind came, the whispers fled, and I was left alone in the dark. Your God did not whisper. He commanded, and the darkness obeyed. I no longer wish to be a mouthpiece for the dead," she declared. "Teach me to speak to the living one." The chapter closes with the beginning of physical changes in the village. The huts of waiting were torn down. The shrines were cleared to make way for a small structure built of wood and faith, a place where the village would gather to hear the word. Teniola and Tamilade began to help Gabriel. Time flowed over the village of red earth like a gentle river. Eventually, the day came when Evangelist Gabriel knew his work was done. He had arrived at a village of shadows. He was leaving a city of light. On the morning of his departure, the entire village gathered at the forest's edge. There were no chains, no violet mist, only the vibrant colors of woven cloth and the sound of a new song. "Remember," Gabriel said, his hand resting on Teniola's shoulder, "the Spirit of the Lord is not confined to a tree or a hut. He lives in you. You are the new temple." Teniola grew into a man of towering strength, but it was a strength tempered by a peace that passed all understanding. He did not become the hunter the elders had once forced him to be. He became a fisher of men. Tamilade's life was a testament to the beauty of the individual. She married a man from a neighboring village, a man who loved her not for her mystic bond, but for the way she sang hymns while gathering water. She became the mother of the village's school, teaching every child that they were fearfully and wonderfully made. Come closer to the fire one last time. The story of the twins has reached its end, but the truth it carries is only beginning. The baobab is fallen, the chains are ash. The red earth is redeemed. Let this be written in your heart. There is no shadow so deep that the light cannot find it. There is no bond so ancient that the cross cannot break it. Go now, not as shadows of your past, but as souls born of the living breath. For whom the Son of Man sets free is free indeed.